All right, so this is the new Garmin Venu X1, and this is one of the more unique watches that Garmin's ever come out with because they've taken a lot of the more advanced features from their Forerunner 970 and Phoenix range and put them into a completely different watch design than those other watches. And being that this is a different design, it also works a little bit different. Like the Venu X1 has a touchscreen just like those other watches, but the Venu X1 has a 2-button configuration versus those other watches which had 5. So I wanted to do this full interface tour just to show you what it can do, as well as some tips and tricks on how to use it. And I think this video could be good for those of you who are going to be brand new to Garmin watches, as well as those of you who have already owned Garmin watches, because there are some differences here in terms of how you use it. And really quick before we get started, if you do find the information in this video to be useful, do me a quick favor and just hit that like button down below. It's a small thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. So the Venu X1 uses a touchscreen along with a 2-button interface. So with the touchscreen, this works just like your smartphone, where you just kind of like tap it to wake it up, and you can just kind of swipe different directions and tap to get into different areas of the interface. Now, to go back a screen, you can do 2 different things here. So you can either swipe to the right here, or you can use the lower right-hand button. And this lower right-hand button is basically your back button from like anywhere in the interface. So you just kind of go back right there. If we swipe again, you can use the back button, or you can just swipe to the right. Now with the upper right hand button, so this is basically your enter button, or you can also use it to access your activities and apps list right here. So with the activities right here, these are going to be your sport profiles. And then we're going to go ahead and take a deep dive into these a little bit later. And then below that, it's going to be your apps. And then alternatively, you can also access all the same stuff that you can access using the upper right hand button by just swiping left from the watch face. Now, if we back out of there, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these widgets first. So with these widgets, so basically these are just basically widgets of different kinds of information that you can access on the watch at one time. So for instance, we have the weather widget up here. We have a sunrise and sunset widget. Here's going to be a health widget. So this is going to be basically like a folder of different health metrics that your watch is going to be collecting. So your body battery, which Garmin's body battery feature basically gives you an indication of your current energy levels at any given point in the day. And then if we back out of there, so here's going to be stuff like my sleep score from last night. So you'll be able to actually see your sleep timeline along with your sleep stages right here, along with Garmin's new breathing variations feature. And then there's also their sleep coach feature. So this basically gives you an indication of how much sleep you potentially may need like tonight. And this is going to be based on your sleep history, as well as like how many activities that you do in a day. So basically, if you don't really do much in a day, it may suggest less sleep here. But if you do like a lot of activities and you didn't get that much sleep the night before, it may suggest more sleep. So like here, it's suggesting a good amount of sleep tonight. And then there's going to be other stuff like your naps, your heart rate, as well as your like HRV status and steps and stuff like that too. So going on from there though, so here's going to be some other widgets. I'll just go ahead and give you an idea of what you can actually get here with all these. So these are some of the more advanced features that do come down from their Forerunner 970 and Phoenix range, like their endurance score feature, which basically just kind of gives you an indication of like how well you can actually do long activities as well as multiple activities over a long period of time. There's going to be your hill score feature. And this is really going to be about how well you do at climbing hills with foot sports like trail running, hiking, and so forth. And then backing out of there, so here's going to be some other widgets and more advanced features that do come down from their other watches. So it'll break out both your running VO2 max as well as your cycling VO2 max here. So if we look at the cycling performance widget here, here's where it'll show your VO2 max, your FTP, as well as your cycling abilities. And with cycling VO2 max, this will be able to be estimated if you pair up a cycling power meter with your Venu X1 here. So then it'll give you that sort of information. And then from there, so there's also your training readiness feature. So this is a little bit poor right now. And the reason for this is that I've basically not been getting much sleep over the last like couple weeks because of a whole lot of content, a whole lot of traveling, as well as probably a little bit of overtraining here. So you'll see that my sleep last night was fair. But if we back out of there, you'll see that I have a high recovery need because I've been doing a lot of riding in the last couple days. And then my HRV status is also a little bit low just because, again, I've been like just really, really exhausted. But we can see here's going to be my acute load. So this shows basically how much training load I've been accumulating and how that actually compares over time right here. So right now, basically for today, since I actually haven't worked out yet, it shows that's a little bit low. But right now, I'm actually staying within my little kind of like range of acute load that they're actually recommending right here to be optimal. And then backing out of there, so here's my recent sleep score scores, which are contributing to my training readiness. And then with my stress history right here, that's going to be pretty low. So yeah. So anyways, yeah, with training readiness, so this is a little bit different than Garmin's body battery feature, where Garmin's body battery feature is going to be more like a daily metric, but the training readiness feature, this is going to be like more of a longer term sort of thing, assessing how ready you are for actual training. And this is going to be based on more like a longer term training history as well as like health history. And then there's also training status right here. So this is different than training readiness, where training status is really about like how productive or unproductive your training is. So right now it actually says productive, which is pretty rare to be honest with you. So right now it basically says that my VO2 max is actually increasing and my HRV is a little bit low right now. So it's kind of interesting that it does say productive right here, even though my HRV status is low, but my acute load, as we saw before, is actually productive. So right now, or optimal, I guess you could say. So again, we can see that it's within the optimal range. And then this is also going to be your load focus right here. So what this shows is basically your distribution of how much time you're spending in different heart rate zones. So right here, purple is going to be like anaerobic. This is just going to be aerobic there in the center, and then like low aerobic with the like blue teal line right there. So this basically kind of helps you balance the actual types of training that you're doing to just make sure you're getting like a nice variety there. And then there's also going to be other widgets that you can have here, like your calories burned, and then your heart rate, your last activity. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at that really quick. So this is going to be your activity history right here. So this is basically a HIIT workout that I did last night. So if we press the enter button right here, here's where you can see all these stats of what actually happened during that workout. So like my heart rate, this is going to be training effect. So basically how much effect that workout is actually impacting my aerobic as well as anaerobic training zones. And then for another example, let's take a look at this outdoor bike ride right here. So with outdoor activities, it'll show a map of what your route that you actually took, along with the distance, speed, time. Then you can kind of like swipe through. So right here with power, I did have a cycling power meter paired up with my Venu X1. So this is why it's actually showing that power. But again, you will need a cycling power meter to collect VO2 max. And then it'll show your speed, heart rate, elevation, time in different heart rate zones, as well as your training effect for that ride. And then also your workout benefit. So basically what kind of actually benefit this particular workout is having onto your system. So this is basically like a general improving fitness workout. But if we go back to that high intensity interval workout that I did last night, so here's where this is going to be more a high intensity workout because, well, it's a high intensity interval training workout. So anyways, backing out of there. So here's going to be all the other widgets that you can have. And I only have a particular amount of widgets loaded onto the screen right now, but you can, at the bottom, there's this edit button right here. If we press this, here's where we can add more widgets. And I'll just kind of go through all these widgets that it actually has available for you here, just so you can kind of see. So quite a few widgets really that you have to choose from. But one thing I wanted to mention here is that since there are a lot of widgets here, you can actually create a folder. So if we create the folder right here, you can actually select different widgets to put within that folder. So let's say you wanted more of like a smartwatch type folder. So you could do like calendar, stocks. Let's go ahead and add music in here as well as notifications. That's probably good. And then from here, you can actually create a folder name. So you can create a custom name if you want. So if you use that, you can actually just use the on-screen keyboard right here. And the keyboard, let's see how well this works here. So, oh, not bad. All right, so let's go and back out. There we go, smart. And then you can actually choose an icon as well. So let's just, I don't know, let's just go ahead and choose this one right here. And then there you go. So there's your smart folder with particular widgets that you chose for that folder, which basically just helps you be a little bit more organized. Now, if we swipe down from the top here, so this is going to be your notification center. So these are going to be the notifications that are coming from your phone. And then to enter any of these, so you can just kind of like tap them, and then you can kind of just read whatever information's there. Now, in terms of like text and stuff like that, so texts are going to be slightly different on iPhone versus Android phone. So with iPhone, you will be able to see the message as well as like clear the message, but with an Android phone, you'll actually be able to reply with an on-screen keyboard. Now, although you can't reply to text using an on-screen keyboard with the Venu X1 if you use an iPhone, you actually can use Siri to reply to a text. So this is additional functionality that you have with the built-in microphone here. Sure thing. Let's go get some tacos.
One option I see is Taco Bell on Main Street in Longmont, about 1.5 miles to your west, and it gets 1.5 stars on Yelp. Is that the one you're looking for?
Hell no. But you can always go ahead and do that same thing with an Android phone using the voice assistant. Now with the notification center here, when you swipe down from the top, so you don't necessarily have to have this here. You can actually change this behavior to access your widget. So to change that, so basically you'll just press the upper right hand button and then go to the bottom here where it says settings, and then go to notifications and alerts. And then if we go to the bottom, we can actually change this notification center to disable it right here. So if we back out of there, what happens now is that if we swipe down from the top, this basically goes to the bottom of your widget stack. So if you don't like notifications or you don't necessarily need to see those notifications, you can turn that notification center completely off if you'd like. So when it comes to the functions with the upper right-hand button here, so if we single press this once, so this is going to be your activities or sport profiles along with your apps down here. So the activities or sport profiles, so these are basically all the like sports or activities that you can do on the watch. And then if we back out of there, these are going to be your apps below that. So these perform different functions, like not actually activity tracking. So here's where you can like access your phone right here, where you can like use the keypad to actually call somebody. And then you can also access your like music controls down here. And then basically other functions that are not necessarily activity related. So let's actually check out this voice command feature while we're here. So with this voice command feature, so this allows you to actually perform different functions of the watch itself. So this is different than your voice assistant. So this does have the voice assistant feature where you can access Siri as well as Google Assistant from your phone, but this voice command feature is controlling your watch itself. So this is where, let's go ahead and do an example here. Set an alarm for 10 minutes. There we go, just like that. And so that alarm will probably go off in like 10 minutes or so, but you can use the voice command feature to do other things like, let's say actually setting alarms. You can also like start an activity if you'd like. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. Start a run. There you go, just like that. So, and then there's other features that you can do using that built-in microphone. So you can actually take voice notes on the watch itself here too. So if we just tap on this, press record. Oh, let's see here. Here's some random thoughts about the Garmin Venu X1. And then you can do that. And then if we back out of there and just press this little like kind of like library icon right here. So here's where we can actually see those. Let's see here. Here's some random thoughts about the Garmin Venu X1. And then you can hear those over your built-in speaker. All right, so backing out of there, here's going to be other functions like your Garmin Share feature. So this is where you can actually share different workouts as well as routes with other Garmin watches. Now let's go ahead and check out the activities here. So with activities, so these are going to be your sport profiles that you can do here. So with, let's say, a running profile right here. So if we go ahead and tap that right here, here's what it'll bring up your first kind of like interstitial screen before you start your activity. So you can just go ahead and start your activity right here using that right-hand button. And then up here, this is going to be your GPS indicator of whether or not you have a GPS signal. So definitely wait for this to go to green before you actually start your outdoor activity. And then it'll also show your battery status up here. So in terms of like how much time that you have left on the watch with its current charge. Then down here, before we actually go and start the activity, so this is going to be different functions that you can do before you start your activity. So here with the training menu, so this shows different workouts that you actually have available to you. So these are going to be for running, cycling, weight training, a whole bunch of stuff here. So we'll go ahead and check those out in here in a little bit. But basically a lot of different functions here that you can actually use for training. And then there's also going to be navigation right here for courses and whatnot. And then you can also configure specific settings for each of these profiles. So with run settings right here, if we tap this, so this is where we can access all these different settings right here in terms of like auto pause, Climb Pro. So with like data screens right here. So this is where you can edit the data screens in terms of the layout as well as the data fields that are within each layout. So with layout, here's where you can edit these all the way up to, let's see here, 8 different data fields right here. So plenty of data on the screen at one time. And then directly from the screen, we can also access the actual watch settings again, like we saw before. And then when it comes to actually starting an activity, you first want to make sure that you have a GPS signal up here, which will be indicated in green. And then from there, all you have to do is just press the upper right-hand button and then everything just starts up. And then to view different data pages while you're doing your activity, so all you'll do is just swipe up and down, but you can also swipe left and right. So if we swipe to the right here, this will bring up the same menu that we saw before we actually started our activity. So here's where we can access navigation settings as well as the activity activity settings right here. But we can also swipe to the right to access the music control. So we can do that. Here's where we're going to actually bring up your music library or whatever music that's synced to your watch, as well as control the music from your phone. And then to get back, we just go ahead and swipe to the right again. And then you can use the lower right-hand button to trigger a lap.
Lap 1, 403.
And then if you actually want to discard it, you actually can just press that button again right there. Lap discarded, just like so. And then to pause and save your activity, or to discard it for that matter, just press the upper right hand button. This will pause it. And then another menu will come up where you'll have the options to resume, save, resume later, lap, go back to start, and then discard the activity if you want as well. So if we want to save it, all we just do is just press save right here and then click save, just like so. Let's see here. Let me show you some workouts and courses as well. So with like road bike right here. So we tap on road bike. So if we go to navigate right here, so this is where with courses, so if I click on saved courses right here, so this course I already sent over from the Garmin Connect app to the Venu X1. So we click on here. So here's where we'll be able to see an actual route map right here, along with the distance and elevation gain on that particular route. And then we tap it, we'll actually be able to see the route in terms of the direction and stuff like that. And if we back out of there, so we'll also be able to see stuff like the elevation profile of the route. And then we'll click these three dots right here. Here's going to be more information, like we can actually do this course in reverse if we'd like to. There's going to be route settings. We can also view the climbs on the route. So this is going to be a pretty important feature where the Venu X1 does have the Climb Pro feature. So what this does is that it basically breaks out individual climbs on a particular route. So here's where we'll see like, all right, so here's the first little like 1 mile climb that I have with like 229 feet of elevation, but then there's going to be this 20-mile climb with 4,600 feet of elevation. So this is a really nice feature to be able to help you manage your efforts on different climbs and make sure you don't blow up. And then backing out there, let's go ahead and show a workout. So with the strength training activity right here, so if we tap on here, so here's going to be different workouts that we can do with the strength training activity. And these have the animations that come on some of their workouts. So with this 30-minute blast workout, again, this is something that I actually loaded over from Garmin Connect. So right here, it's going to show a muscle map of different muscle groups that it's actually going to be targeting. So with this, it shows like it's going to be back. It's going to be like a whole body basically workout right here. So with this, it shows you 8 different exercises along with the time that it's going to take. And then if we click this more button right here, this will show the different types of equipment that you may need for this particular type of workout, which is kind of nice. And then you can also see the description of what it's supposed to be. And then you can also go ahead and see the actual details of that right here too. So here's going to be like the different rest periods as well as the different types of workouts here. And then we tap into any of these. So this is what's kind of cool is that there's also workout animations in terms of how you actually do the particular type of workout. So as well as the muscle group that it's targeting. So it definitely gives you a lot of instruction with these types of workouts. And one more thing, by the way, too, is that all these features I'm showing you today, these do not require the new Connect IQ Plus subscription plan. So all these features that I'm showing you today, this all comes in the watch and doesn't require an additional subscription. All right, so that's the general gist of getting around the Venu X1, but now I want to show you some more advanced features, I guess you could say. So if we long press the upper right-hand button, so this is going to bring up your controls menu. So here's where we're going to do different things like, let's say, adjusting the volume right here. So this is where you can adjust the voice volume to a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And then you can set stuff like alarms right here. You can also power off the watch. You can lock the device, and then you can also like find your phone, enter sleep mode, so on and so forth. But then here's where you can actually edit these functions as well. So if we press this right here, so here's where we can add more controls to the menu. So here's going to be a full list of what you can actually do here. Quite a few right there. So I'm just going to click done because I'm pretty much happy with everything. Now, if we long press the lower right hand button, so this is going to access the built-in LED flasher right there. So that's where you can adjust the brightness using the touchscreen over on the left-hand side, go all the way down to red if you'd like. There you go. To turn off the flashlight, we just long press the lower right-hand button again. Now you can actually customize the behaviors of these buttons in terms of the long presses. So if we go and access these settings again, so if we go here, access settings, if we go all the way down to the bottom, we have shortcuts. And then here's where we can actually customize those shortcuts. So there's basically 3 options that we have here: holding the start key, holding the back key, as well as holding the start and back key together right here. So these are going to be the defaults of how they actually have them set up. So Holding the start key has access to the controls menu. I sort of like that because it actually mimics the behavior that is pretty much on the other Garmin watches right here. But here's all the different functions that you can assign to these shortcuts. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through all of these just so you can kind of see what you have available to you. There you go. And then you can also customize the behavior of holding the back button right here to access the flashlight, or if you'd like to change that to something else. Now, this is something that I really wish the behavior was the same as other Garmin watches, where with other Garmin watches, you'll actually double press the upper left-hand key to access the flashlight, where I'm not really sure why you have to hold it on the Venu X1 versus like a double tap. They don't really allow that actual double tap behavior right here. It would just make the behavior consistent between Garmin devices. So I think that's a little bit confusing. Plus, it would actually add more functionality to these buttons, considering that these do have less buttons than there's other watches. And then by default, holding the start and back key together is set to take a screenshot, but my recommendation is to actually change this to lock and unlock device. And the reason for this is that being that this only has 2 buttons versus the 5-button configuration, you will be utilizing the touchscreen to get around a lot of the interface. But touchscreens can also be a little bit susceptible to like water, where when water touches it, you can actually like enable the touchscreen. Like in the shower, you can definitely get some accidental touches right here. And so to prevent this, what you can do is have it set up to lock the device with those 2 button presses. So we just long press those, just locks the device, and at this point the touchscreen doesn't actually function, which really can be beneficial again if you're going to be like in a lot of like wet scenarios. And then to unlock it, all you have to do is basically long press one of these buttons. It's a little bit strange though, because you'll notice that it brought up the controls menu here. So it both unlocks the device as well as brings up the controls menu. So again, I would really appreciate if there was like some sort of double tap behavior here, which would add more functionality to these buttons. And then by default, the start and back button is set to take a screenshot. But again, you can go ahead and change this to whatever kind of behavior that you like. So for me, actually, I sort of like to use the lock unlock device feature right here. So what this does is that it locks the device when it's not going to be in use. So right here, if we back out of there completely. So right now, if we lock the device, what happens here is that you basically like, you kind of can't like accidentally press any buttons or like accidentally touch the touchscreen. And then to unlock the device, you'll basically long press one of these buttons right here. One sort of like little strange thing that you just kind of noticed though is that it did bring up the controls menu as well. So it basically unlocks the device as well as brings up the controls menu. So I think again, that's really where I really wish there was that double press behavior of these buttons, which would extend the functionality and would make it a little bit more in line with their other watches here. So let's go ahead and check out some of the other settings now. So with notifications and alerts, so this is again, we kind of saw all this stuff before where with smart notifications, we can adjust the different kinds of notifications that are going to be coming in. So calls, texts, as well as apps. So with any of these, you can adjust whether you want the tone or vibration, toggle them on or off. And then you can also change the vibration options in terms of like pattern there too. And then there's also privacy settings where this will actually bring up the notification on your watch face, but it won't show the actual content of the notification. So it keeps it a little bit more private. You can also adjust the timeout of how long those notifications will stay on the screen. And then with health and wellness, so these are going to be like different types of alerts and summaries that you get throughout the day. So here's going to be your daily summary. So this is what you'll get at the end of the day in terms of like what kind of workout day that you had. And then there's also going to be report settings. So here's where you can actually adjust your morning report as well as your evening report. So morning report is something that you'll get first thing in the morning that shows you information that you likely want to see first thing in the morning, like let's say your sleep score, your body battery, your training readiness, all that kind of stuff. So here's where you can actually edit the report to show what kinds of information you actually want to see in the morning. And then same thing goes for evening report here. You can edit all the information that you want on that particular day. Or evening, I guess you could say. And then backing out of there, so here's going to be like your volume and vibration controls here. So here's again where you can adjust the volume of your voice and system alerts right here, or you can just mute it all. And then you can change alert tones as well as button tones, as well as that vibration pattern that we saw before. And then with display settings right here, so with the display settings, so here's where you can adjust the brightness, and with the always on display here. So this is where right now, if we back out of there and go back to the watch face, if we're not interacting with the watch right here, it'll dim to this lower brightness watch face. And as you can see, again, it's pretty darn bright right here. And then to wake it up, all we do is just tap on the screen, or we just turn our wrist right here. However, We can also turn this off, which will have an impact on battery life in a good way. So it'll basically use less battery at this point. So if we turn this off, go back to the watch face, when we're not interacting with it, it just turns completely off. And this will again save on battery life. And then to wake it up, we just turn our wrist. So for me, I like to have the always on display on. So I'm just going to flip that on, but it will warn you that this will reduce battery life quite a bit. And then you can also change your stuff like your text size right here. So change the text size to whatever you'd like. Leave it at default for me. And then here's the red shift mode. So here's where you can change the entire interface to different shades of red, orange, or green. So if we go and turn this on right here, so boom, it just like changes the entire interface to red, but we can change from red to orange to green. So right here is where if you want your watch to look like the Matrix, you totally can. And the reason for this feature, by the way, is that during evening times and nighttime hours, you may want to actually shift it to one of these red shift, orange, or green shift modes because it reduces the amount of blue light that you're having in those times where blue light can actually affect your circadian rhythm. So that's actually what that feature is for. And then here's where you can change the gesture mode. So this is where, again, when you like flip your wrist, this is where it's going to enable display. So you can turn that off if you'd like. And then there's also going to be timeout settings in terms of like how long the display stays active before it dims to that lower brightness or turns it completely off. So by default, it's 8. And then this is probably a feature that I would highly recommend that you turn on. So this is the touch lock feature. So with the touch lock feature, so what happens now is that just by default, the touchscreen, it totally works all the time. It also works in the shower or when it gets wet. So when water gets on the display, it can actually activate the touchscreen display. But that touch lock feature kind of prevents a lot of that from happening without necessarily having to lock the device like we saw earlier, like completely lock the device. So if we go back to display brightness, if we turn touch lock on, when it becomes inactive, you see that little lock icon that goes right there? So, well, I actually can't use the touchscreen. This is a good thing, again, because I think it actually prevents those accidental touches. So instead of having to use that lock device feature that we saw before, with the touch lock feature, all we have to do is just quickly swipe down from the top of the screen, and then we can activate the touchscreen without necessarily having to do that hotkey combination or that shortcut. So this is just a lot more convenient feature to prevent those accidental touches from the touchscreen. And this is, again, like really one of my favorite features that has come on their newer generation devices is this touch lock feature. And then in terms of connectivity, so here's where you could adjust the different settings for your phone, Wi-Fi, a whole bunch of other stuff here. The one I kind of wanted to show you here, though, is going to be sensors. So these are going to be the different external sensors that you can pair with your device. So if we go ahead and click Add New right here, so here's where all the different sensors that you can actually add to your device. So quite a few here. And then backing out of there, these are your focus modes. So focus modes are basically like different modes that you have for activities, using it as a smartwatch on a daily basis, as well as sleep. So you can actually adjust different settings like your brightness, sound, and touchscreen, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So here's different focus modes for, let's say, sleep and activity. So right now we're in smartwatch mode because we're not sleeping and we're not doing an activity. So if we click on sleep right here, so here's where you can adjust your sleep schedule. So that's a schedule that I have currently set up. And then whether we want the watch face on or off. And then we can also adjust like different settings like notifications, whether we actually want those coming on or off. So right now by default, it has them off because we don't necessarily want to be interrupting our sleep, but some of you may need those notifications. And then there's also all the different alerts and stuff that can come on as well. And then there's other stuff like volume settings right here. There's display settings. So this is where you'll be able to set it to the ultra low setting for the brightness. So again, it doesn't necessarily like interrupt your circadian rhythms there. You can turn the always on display off. There's a ton of different settings here in terms of like what you can do. So that's going to be sleep. And then for activity, again, you can customize the actual specific settings for that mode, or basically when you're doing an activity. So you can set the different like satellite accuracy modes right here, voice alerts, notifications, all that kind of stuff. So this basically allows you to kind of customize the behavior when you're doing certain things, like just basically using it as a smartwatch when you're sleeping, as well as doing sports and activities. So that's what focus modes are all about. And then activities right here. So this is where you can adjust the activity settings like we saw before. So this is the same thing. So if we press here, so this is where we can adjust the actual run settings like we saw before, like data screens and whatnot. And then with health and wellness, so this is where you can adjust different settings, like let's say enabling or disabling the wrist-based heart rate sensor. And then you can also change whether or not you want the SpO2 sensor to be enabled or how you want it to be enabled. So basically all day, during sleep, or on demand. The SpO2 sensor, this does require quite a bit of energy from the watch. So I would definitely consider like how much you actually need this data for. So for me, I actually have it just during sleep. So some of you may need it all day long. Some of you may not need it at all and just want to take on-demand measurements, which will be the best in terms of your battery life. And then backing out of there, these are going to be different settings for your map and navigation. So here's going to be your map manager, where you can actually manage the maps that are currently on your watch. So there's different maps for all sorts of different things like golf, the topo active maps, as well as outdoor maps plus. So right now I only have the topo active maps for North America loaded because I don't necessarily need any other maps at this point, but here's where you can add a map if you'd like. So this is where you'll be able to download maps over Wi-Fi, but I would highly recommend you actually plug your watch into your computer and download maps through Garmin Express, because Wi-Fi can take a while and it is also a pretty big battery drain. So I would highly recommend using your computer to actually manage the maps on your watch. But the maps that are loaded on your watch should be already preloaded with your particular region where you bought your watch. And then here's your safety and tracking information. So here's where you're going to be able to send a link of your location to your contacts, where they'll be able to actually follow along your activity while you're doing them. And this does require your phone though, because the Venu X1 does not have a cellular connection. So the Venu X1 will rely on the cell connection from your phone to perform that feature. And then with instant detection, so right here, so instant detection is basically, it's going to be available for particular sport profiles, as you can see right there. But so basically running, walking, road biking, hiking, as well as rucking. And then there's all the unsupported activities like, let's say mountain biking, where the watch may accidentally actually report an instant when it's not really an instant, where you're just like, going down really rough trail or something like that. But instant detection is basically looking for some sort of like impact or sudden stop, where you suddenly stop moving and don't keep on moving. So this is where they'll just send an alert to your emergency contacts of your location that an incident has been detected. Then there's also the assistance feature, and this is different than all those other features, where this is where you'll be able to send requested assistance to one of your emergency contacts, saying that you may not necessarily feel safe or something like that. And then here's also going to be your music functions right here. So this is where you're going to be access your music providers as well as your audio output. So with music providers right here, right now I have Spotify loaded up, but you also can control the music that's playing on your phone. And then you can also choose your audio output, whether that's going to be the built-in speaker, or you can go ahead and pair up a pair of Bluetooth headphones. And then with user profile, so this is where you're going to be able to see your personal stats, like your fitness, age, and your gender, and adjust all those different things and stuff like that. And then power manager, here's where you're going to adjust different settings to basically hopefully save you on battery life. So with the battery saver feature, this turns off certain functions on your watch. So you can actually edit what you actually want this setting to do. So you can go to a lower power watch face, you can disable music, disconnect from your phone, disconnect Wi-Fi, turn the heart rate sensor off if you'd like. And again, basically all in an aim to save you on battery life with that battery saver feature. You can also choose to whether you want to see the battery percentage as well as the battery estimates, and then as well as the low battery alerts in terms of like when you actually get those alerts. And then finally with the system settings down here, so we saw that before, where here's where we're going to adjust the shortcuts on the device. Here's where you can set a passcode. So with the passcode feature right here, so let's just go ahead and set a passcode right here, just so to kind of show you what this means. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So what happens here is when you take off your watch and it doesn't detect that you're actually wearing the watch, what'll happen is that it'll actually ask you to enable the passcode to actually enter your watch to access all the details. And then from there, there's also like adjusting the do not disturb feature, whether you want that on or off. You can also calibrate the compass and altimeter. So we tap on there, and then we can adjust the time as well in terms of the format and whatnot. By default, the time should just be set from your phone. And then we can also change the language on the watch. And in terms of the different languages, let's just go ahead and show you all those different languages right now. Let's go back to English. You can change the voice features as well. So there's basically, you can actually change the different dialects as well here. Quite a few to choose from. Then you can actually change the voice type from male to female. And then here's some more advanced features, like let's say the actual format in terms of the units, like, let's say, statute or metric right here. And then there's also like other system features, like let's say the restore or reset feature if you need to reset your watch for some reason, checking for software updates, and just basically like a general about page and stuff like that. Oh, and then one more thing I wanted to show you are the watch faces. So if we press the upper right hand button, so if we scroll down here, here's where we can go to watch face. So here's the default watch face that it has selected for you, but there are other watch faces that you can choose from. So let's go ahead and add new, and here's going to be all the different watch faces that you have to choose from on the device. So just kind of scroll through these all for you, just so you can kind of see the different options that they have. All right, so there you go. So there's all the watch faces. So as you can see, there's a lot to this watch. And for those of you who are familiar with Garmin watches, it definitely does act a little bit differently in a lot of different ways. But I hope the information in this video helped give some tips and tricks on how to use this watch. And if it did help you out, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below. And if you have any questions about anything I didn't cover in this watch, and I tried to cover as many things as possible, but this watch is vast, so I'm sure you probably have some questions. Just go ahead and drop those down in the comment section down below, and I'll do my best to answer those. In the meantime, enjoy your watch, and we will see you in the next video.